Welcome and hello, everyone. It's so good to see all of you. My name is Lauren Jin. I'm the program manager for food experiences at ISS Guggenheimer, and I am your lucky host for today's session. Now, at ISS Guggenheimer, our diversity, equity, and inclusion culture is made up of 3 pillars: lead, grow, and deepen. The goal of this diversity series is to help us become an organization that leads with inclusion, which unlocks the power of diversity, so that we can deepen our user and community partnerships. I'm so happy that you have joined us today for another really thrilling segment of Lead, Grow, and Deepen. I would love to hear from all of you. Please find that chat box over on the right side of your screen so you can say hello to me, to our guest speaker, to your fellow team members across the US. Go ahead and type in, give us a warm welcome. Tell us where you're calling in from. Hello, I see Chrissy in Boulder. We have Randy. Hi, Dean. Good to see all of you. So throughout this event, we want to hear from you. So whether you have comments or questions, feel free to use that chat box. Let us know what you're feeling. Let us know what you're thinking. And on that note, we are so thrilled to welcome Jamal Rasoully, the founder and CEO of actually several food and restaurant concepts, including Spin Sauce, The Halal Shack, Jamal's Chicken, and Baba's Pizza. Welcome, Jamal.
Hello. How are you doing, everyone? Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. We have some folks dialing in from Chicago, another person dialing in from the Bay Area, from Austin, Texas. So it looks like we've got folks all over the US. And Jamal, again, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today.
Oh, no problem. Thank you guys for having me. It's quite an honor and a pleasure to be with you here today.
So you're talking to a bunch of food people. So we always like to ask, just to get started, how did you find your way to the food industry as your career? Is this, a path that you always knew that you wanted to follow?
So I kind of have a funny story. I started my career in working in the food industry at the age of 11. My father was an Afghan-American immigrant who immigrated here during the Soviet invasion. And one of the first jobs I had to do was basically help him close and clean his restaurant every day after school. So much so that I ended up quitting football and basketball and all the sports I played. I was a varsity athlete, and I had to quit because my parents are immigrants, and they were like, "You need to work. What are sports? You're not going pro." So my dad literally asked me to quit because he didn't want to pay for help. But with that being said, I worked in food my whole life. But my dad had little mom and pop type restaurants. The day I graduated college, I was the first to graduate in my family, and I kind of told my parents and my dad that I would never work in food again. I kind of swore it off. I said I went to
Okay.
I was like, I'm never going to work in the food space again. But ironically, the food business found me, right? I actually, I worked in corporate America for 9 years as a director at a consulting firm. And I just kind of always found myself back working in the kitchen and just finding ways to be more innovative with food. And I had a love for kind of cooking and creating different recipes, which brought me to my creation of my first company, which was Spin Sauce. We basically took Middle Eastern flavors, Mediterranean spices, and created creamy, zesty dressing that wasn't being sold in basically grocery stores, but you could find it at street food vendors. Or it's kind of like what I would compare tomato sauce 30 years ago, where like everyone that was Italian, their grandmother, their mother had their own recipe. But now if you go to a grocery store, you could find, 4 or 5 different brands of tomato sauce. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to start Spin Sauce. And I was a Middle Eastern white sauce. And then from there, I kind of just got back into the food business. I quit my day job, and now I'm lucky enough to say that I found my purpose again, working in the food business. I love it. I wouldn't trade it for the world. As many problems as I'm sure all of us have working in the food space, I wouldn't trade it for the world. There's nothing happier than being able to give someone food and knowing that they enjoy the food because I had something to do with it.
And would you say that that's kind of like what inspires you to stay in the food industry now that you've sort of found your way back, or it found you again?
Absolutely. It's definitely not the money, and it's not the hours. I mean, we're a bootstrap company. I'm on this podcast because I'm lucky enough to have a great network and some recognition because of my brands, but I very much am in the lab every day. I'm working shoulder to shoulder with the team, and what makes me happiest is doing that. And that's why I'm still in it. I love being in operations and I love being with people. I worked at a desk and I had a corporate job I was very successful in, but it wasn't as satisfying as being able to serve. And I think that that's what makes me happy in the food space, is that I'm able to provide for others. And I think that's exactly why we continue to grow, because that you get addicted to it. You get addicted to wanting to be able to have someone share the experiences that you have with the food that you created. And I think all restaurant brands that carry that type of energy tend to do really well. And like, I love In-N-Out and I love Shake Shack because for as big as they are, their core values are really to share positive energy and positive experiences. And that's what we're trying to do now, for sure.
So let's talk a little bit about the food that you have created. I have some photos here because the photos look delicious and I am very hungry. So talk to us a little bit about like your different concepts here. I know you said, maybe the birth of Spin Sauce was sort of like that white sauce concept. First of all, maybe for everyone out there, explain white sauce and maybe, some of the flavor profiles that your specific sauce has.
For sure. So I'll talk about the food and like the idea of food first, and I'll kind of give you the concept. Everything that I do is basically a fusion. So the most popular food brands today, like Chipotle, Cava, Panda Express, they're in one way or another a different type of a fusion brand. They basically took one type of recipe and combined it with a different type and created a new food. I'm very honest in saying that my parents gave me every single recipe within my organization, from the pizza to the white sauce. But I did add my spin to it, right? And that's what we call the Spin Sauce, was because I changed the things. And the way I describe Spin Sauce specifically, it's a creamy, zesty Mediterranean dressing, but it's a mayo-based product that the same recipe was used for years in Afghanistan or in a different part of the Middle East. You could use it, but they used to use yogurt. But what we did is we used mayo, and that was because mayo is more shelf stable and it had a different taste to it. And that's how we created Spin Sauce. But the irony is with the Halal Shack was made because I found that there was a huge void within the non-traditional world. For example, colleges, hospitals, airports, different BNI accounts. There was no real authentic Middle Eastern food that wasn't, in my opinion, trying to be influenced with being straight from like that country. And I'll give you an example. Like if you would go to a certain company and you would go to their cafeteria, they would have like an Indian day, or they would have a day where they're like, we're serving gyros and it's Greek day. And in my opinion, I was like, the genre of food is so big that this is not doing it justice. So we created a brand that had authentic Mediterranean, Middle Eastern flavors that also had an American style spin. So it could be very popular for the general population, appeal to be eaten every day. And with that, we also wanted to make sure that it was certified halal because we wanted to be conscious of the dietary restrictions that are within the non-traditional retail space. I think sometimes when you venture out to the street side businesses, you'll find just about any type of business that caters to any type of diet because it's a free market. But within the non-traditional space, it's really not a free market. You have a captive audience with the contract service provider or a limited purview. So I wanted to create a solution for those contract service providers as well as those operators so that way they can have a brand that's of the Mediterranean, Middle Eastern genre of flavor, but also halal, have vegan, vegetarian, and kosher options. So our ultimate mission of why we started was we wanted to bridge the gap between people and culture because like if you look at the problem statement, that's really the problem is like there's a gap, between the people and the culture, and Halal Shack serves as that community driven model where we're trying to bridge the gap. So our menu constantly evolves and changes to include things that could be more inclusive and provide diversity, so much so that I'm hoping that what we do is not diverse much longer. People always ask me about who's your biggest competitor. I'm like, I encourage competition because if there's more competitors in the diverse food space, the food will no longer be diverse. And that's truly what makes me happy because like most of you working in the food business, if you're in it for the money, there's really a lot easier ways to get rich. It's definitely not the food business, especially not right now. And with all that being said, Jamal's Chicken and Baba's Pizza was started as offshoots from Halal Shack because we had demand for having that genre of food within a dietary restriction model. So people wanted to have a halal fried chicken that also had vegan chicken tenders and other items, and the same with pizza. And we just so happened to have like really good recipes. So the food was really delicious. They were really popular. So we're very lucky that those two brands are doing really well as well.
Totally. And I think that, if everyone's looking at these pictures on here, +1 in the chat box, if you could eat any of these things every single day, those look amazing. So as far as your recipes go, you say that you have a lot of influence from your family. How have your parents or your greater family sort of like responded to you taking influence from a lot of these recipes and putting that sort of like American twist on them?
So what's so funny? I'll bring up something as recent as like something we're doing now. My father is my hero and my mother is my hero. I owe everything to them. I didn't come from a normal background. Like we grew up in the ghetto. We grew up in a really, I would say, poverty-stricken lifestyle, but we never felt it because there was so much love. So when I talk about taking their recipes, I include that it's their energy and passion. And that's so hard to translate. It's so hard to like take that and put that into food, but we somehow have created a culture and we've created a system where when we talk about feedback, that's what I ask them for. I'm like, Mom, do you think this was made with love? Right? Because like recipes, we all work in food. It's actually, in my opinion, very easy to make things taste good as long as they're hot and they're fresh. Like if something's hot and something's fresh, most likely it's going to be better than 80% of other things out there. Now to finite and make it a little better, obviously there's more tailoring. I'm not trying to discount the idea of making your food perfect, or there's more to it. There's a lot more to it, but we look right now for my family and their influence past the perspective of herbs and spices and counts of taste. We look for like, hey, is this made with love? Like when you go to the store, do you feel like you're getting an experience? And that's what I asked them for. Because we're getting so big now, we're like, it's easy to make the food good. And again, easy is the wrong word. I know how to make the food good, but do I know how to translate that energy that they gave us as kids that we never felt without? And can our customers feel as if they're getting food that's authentic and yet has an energy and not just another brand? So we actually have that fear where we're trying to not be so big where we end up discounting our culture. We want to maintain that focus of diversity and inclusion where we can have an impact, because the byproduct of success is growth, but there's also dissonance with that because, it's impossible to say you'll do everything right. We do so much more wrong than we do right. It's insane. Like most people, I don't know if the CEOs of companies would admit that, but I'm still small enough where I can say that. Like we make a lot of mistakes and we learn from our mistakes. And one of the biggest things that we look to learn is how do we continue to make the culture and energy better so that we can continue to as your title says, lead, grow, and kind of deepen our mission, bridging the gap.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack there. I think I especially really like you calling out that, acknowledging that there's going to be mistakes, there's going to be bumps, but we're learning from that, and that's what makes us stronger, and that's what makes us better. So I want to remind everyone who has tuned in, hello to all of you. I know I see a couple more folks from Austin, Chicago, Phoenix. Great. If you have questions throughout this for Jamal, would love to see you pop them into the chat box so that we can get those answered for you. But Jamal, you were sort of talking about, food being that like great connector, being able to share our culture. And so as a first generation Afghan American, like, why do you have this mission to like share that out with like the wider public? Why is that so important to you?
That's exactly my purpose. Why it's important to me is because like when I worked and I served, the purpose behind the serving was that like not being left without was that energy from the food that I learned from my culture. So like that's what I took away from my parents' influence, and that's how I feel like I give back. So it's honestly selfish. It's like for me to feel like I'm fulfilling what I'm doing, this company serving as a platform for me to help do that. And I'm just so lucky I found more like-minded people to do it with. Like I have amazing clients, I have amazing people that work within our company. And quite honestly, they do all the hard work. I have the easy job now, and I'm very blessed about that. Like I work 18 hours a day, but that 18 hours doesn't feel like a job. Like I really don't feel like I work. I just feel like I drink a lot of coffee and gain a lot of weight, quite honestly.
Hey, look, if I had food that looked as good as yours around me all the time, I think that I would be struggling with the weight gain as well.
Yeah, for sure. And all the travel doesn't help. Like airport food could definitely use some influence on some better options, right?
Yeah.
But no, with that being said, it's my purpose, and that's what made me happy in life. And I just want to translate that happiness because I have the platform to do so. I don't think not many people, I can say this, are that lucky. So that's why I consider myself lucky.
Totally. Well, and I think that, we mentioned earlier that a lot of your concepts are coming to life in universities across the US. And I definitely didn't have these options available to me as a student in university. So why universities? Why has that been your target?
I would say our target is all non-traditional. So it's B&I, it's healthcare, and universities. But why I think universities have taken off so much is we're an extension. Like we're not a normal brand in the sense that like from the business side, beside from the food being super popular, like when we open on campuses, we're normally in the top 3 of the busiest concepts. And we're competing with like Chick-fil-A and Panda Express. And I have to remind everyone, those are billion-dollar companies, and we're just like the halal shack. Like we're really not there. But with that being said, and hats off to them because they run amazing businesses, but our food does really well because people tend to really like the flavor profile and the operation that we run. But on the business side, we're an extension of your management team. So for example, if you have a client and you license our brand, it's not only as if you use our operation and you use our logo and use our food, you actually use our leadership team to help manage your unit. And it's to the level of minutia of like your par levels and your prep amounts to your daily audits, ensuring that you have a halal program. So why we've gravitated to growth on the university side is I would say that the highest demand for Mediterranean, Middle Eastern food in general has been in the university side because they've been more susceptible to wanting to open up to change. I think that everyone all can agree in the food service space that we work in of non-traditional space, it's very challenging to change something. It's very, very hard. So I do know we're growing in B&I pretty heavily next. So we have, I think, 31 locations now. I think there's only 18 open and the rest are opening this year. And we do have about, I think, 4 in the B&I space. But I do anticipate as we grow that space to quadruple, as well as healthcare. We're growing significantly in healthcare because there's no halal options at hospitals, as well as really standardized Middle Eastern food there.
Yeah. Well, and to echo what you said earlier about like the universities, I feel like that generation, this generation that we're going to be looking to serve in the next couple of years, they really are looking for that diversity, right? And people always want to see themselves in menus. And so having that representation and that making them feel included is so important. And I think that the Halal Shack really delivers that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So next question for you is, it's really hard for me, at least, to stay, in the know with all of the latest trends, and what people are wanting. how do you stay attuned to what's popular, what the latest trends are?
Honestly, it's something that we struggle with because the time, like when you're a small company and you're also a startup, like I'm a what you call a Swiss Army CFO or CEO. Like I wear several hats, and one of the things that have just come natural to me is I've been lucky that the things that I like, most people have liked. So like, it's more just like, we just added a new vegan option, which is, it's a chickpea. We call it chickpeas korma. And it was just something that I really liked that I used to make for myself. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to add this, and added it, and it did really well. But with that being said, I'm also very lucky because students and customers in the field that we're the biggest in are not shy. So we're told very quick what works and what doesn't work and what should work. So we rely heavily on feedback from our customers, and we utilize social media to kind of foster and generate feedback. We utilize QR codes at every unit for experience.
Mm-hmm.
And my focus on the company's culture has allowed us to have an environment where it's what I call experiential dining. Like we're focused just as much on the food and just as much on the experience equivalently. So like, like it's an equivalent balance for us.
Right.
When we go to evaluate a unit, we're not only evaluating how your food tastes, how your food looks, we're also evaluating, which is very subjective, how people feel, right? And we have a set of standardized culture questions, and we also assess customers' feedback. Like very simple, do you like the food? And they say yes or no. And if they say no, we want to find out why. And again, a lot of companies do this, but since we're so small, we're able to be nimble and we're able to react a little faster, which makes my job very easy.
So I think you heard a couple of things. One, listen to your customers, because they'll probably tell you what they're looking for, and that obviously is good for business.
Yeah.
But two, also, you said, hey, I think this is a good idea. I like this. Maybe other people will like this too. And then just give it a shot, like your chickpea dish. That sounds amazing. And it sounds like it resonated with a lot of other folks who are dining at your establishments.
For sure. Yeah. And that's exactly it. Something to speak about the chickpeas was I always look for more options that like service dietary restrictions. So like we wanted to add more vegan options, but I felt like we were the first brand to launch Impossible Meat nationally as a halal impossible option. And then I just was like, we need to expand this into stuff that, we can serve that's more versatile for someone who doesn't want to eat Impossible Meat. We have falafel, but then I was like, we also need to add something else. So that's why we added the chickpeas. And most people would not think about cooking chickpeas and serving it as a vegan protein, but it's something in my culture we do, but we add it with meat. So all I was thinking about was like, if you just get rid of the meat, it's the same dish and it tastes just as good. And it was like, it literally just came to me like that because I always ate it and I liked it a lot. And lately I've personally been focusing on a diet of trying to, focus more on cleaner eating, and eating chickpeas was like a big part of my diet. And I was like, this tastes great. And we're so lucky that it's working.
I need to stop by.
Yeah. There's times it doesn't work and we take it off the menu, and I guess that's life. We deal with it.
That is life. So you talked a little bit about like experiential dining and like how that is so central, right? The food needs to be good, but the experience also needs to be good. So for you, when you are going and experiencing your own dining, maybe at one of your establishments, maybe somewhere else, what is one thing that really elevates that experience for you?
So are you asking what are things that I look for, or what are things that we've planned for? Like what are the things that we focus on?
What are the things when you go out to eat and you're experiencing this as a guest that really like sets this experience apart? What keeps you coming back?
Yeah, and this does not mean to sound cliche, but it's personability and patience. I truly think we're all human and we all make mistakes. And I think that food establishments are not given enough credit for like how successful they are every day. And I think that when I go to a food establishment and the staff is very personable and patient, it makes my experience a lot better because no matter what the food tastes like, I can relate to them. I'm like, I understand. So that's truly what I look for. It could be like a really nice steakhouse, or it could be like something like a food truck. The only thing I really look to establish my first line of defense is like, how personable were they and how patient were they with me for this order? Because if like bad customer service, I think translate a lot into your employees' contentness and satisfaction. And as leaders, we should always be looking at that first, because if your customer service is bad, there's usually bigger problems there.
Definitely. And I think, as I hear that, absolutely, patience. having great customer service. I'm curious to hear from all the other folks on the call as well. When you go to a dining establishment, what is that one thing that like really elevates that experience for you? Feel free to pop that into the chat box. In the meantime, Jamal, we do have a question from one of our chefs. I'm going to pop that up on the screen here. Chef Matthew's asking, with the growing interest in diverse food and fusion cuisine, what do you think is our biggest obstacle to meeting the demand? Do you have any ideas on how to overcome that challenge?
This is such a good question. So I can't say what the biggest obstacle is because I would be not that educated in other cuisines. I really specialize in the Mediterranean, Middle Eastern cuisine. What I can speak to in that regard is originality and authenticity. I think that anyone should be able to make any recipe outside. Like, it doesn't matter what your background is. You can cook any kind of food. That's the point of diversity. That's what we want to do. We want to promote. But I think making it originally yours, like using their influence and being okay saying this is my version of this is important. Because I think if we try to imitate someone else's version and recreate it, it may come off as disingenuous when you could just make your own version, and own it and just say, hey, this is not quite that. It's not quite this. It's this, right? And people, I think, really take well to that. And I think sometimes if there's trends out there and we try to copy the trend may just kind of end up like you may water it down a little bit, or you may make it better. But either way, if you make it your own, I think that will prevent people from thinking that you're doing something else. Because I find like people don't want to eat some places because they think that the person making it is trying to copy someone, specifically with diverse food. And I don't think that's the case. I think it's just their version of it.
Yeah, I think sometimes we kind of dance around that, right? Like we want to highlight different cultures, but then sometimes you're like, well, do I have the right to cook this kind of food? And it sounds like what you're saying is totally, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. What we heard from one of our other past speakers as well is give credit where credit's due, right? And make the food good, right? It has to taste good. So I think that's how you could really, really do a great job and do it justice.
Do you know, I think what we struggle with in like the food service space, we have some accounts that do $25,000 a day in like a QSR, 200 square foot space. And it's so hard at that volume to sometimes, like if we had a rotating menu, like a lot of your accounts do, to like create a rotating menu at that scale. So I think the best thing to do is to always just own it. And like, to your point, like you give credit to someone, but just say, hey, this is the best I can do with the volume, because the end user doesn't understand that the steakhouse they go to, that's a 5-course steakhouse that costs $1,000. They can't compare you to that. You know what I mean? You're serving 25,000 meals today. It's a little bit different, but that's marketing too. The marketing teams have to be able to translate that this is our version of this. And we're more trying to provide you an experience and variety, not trying to provide you a solution to what you're looking for. This is a solution for what the general population is looking for. And the best brands find a way to communicate it to exactly what someone's looking for, though.
Yeah, that communication piece is huge as well. Yeah. So what is next, right? So you have Spin Sauce, you have the Halal Shack, Jamal's Chicken, Baba's Pizza. Yeah. What's next? What's on the horizon?
We have a lot of unique things happening. I would say the most interesting thing that's happening in the past month, which is shocking to me, is I'm kind of taking the company back to our roots of how I started. So when we first started, we made our own sauces and we did things in certain ways. It was like a simple scratch. And then as we got bigger, we were like, oh, we're going to, streamline this and do that. And in the past 4 weeks, I've flipped the company upside down. I was like, you know what?
Okay.
Because honestly, with the supply chain constraints and the issues that we have within supply chain and the workforce, I was like, no, we're going to go back to our roots and we're just going to pay for it. And that's life, because we as a company can't sell a bad bowl. If we sell a bad bowl, we have to try to fix it. If we sell I don't want a single meal going out wrong for any reason. And I have to do everything I can. So when I think about what's next, I think about continuing to have a company that can make the impact like that, where I can say that I can put efforts in place to reduce the amount of food that goes out that someone doesn't absolutely love. And kind of to give credit to Chick-fil-A, they do an unbelievable job of that. Like wow, just wow. Their love it here mentality and just the way that the majority of their food now, granted, like I said, we're all human. Some food will go out bad and we'll try to reduce that, but they do an unbelievable job. And I think it's because they stick to their core, they stick to their roots, they stick to what they're good at. And as we continue to grow, we want to continue to grow with partners that have that mindset. And that's another thing we're looking to do. We're limiting our partnerships to the right people.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do believe that most people work for companies, but a larger number of people work for people, And I think that what we're trying to do is establish the right partnerships with the right people. And we've been so lucky. Like, we have unbelievable partners right now. And we want to just continue to grow in a selective way with people that can be like-minded and innovative, but want to have that impact. Because like I said, it's going to be a long time before, we become wealthy off this. So let's just try to do the best thing we can, because life is short, and let's feel good while we're doing it.
Totally. Well, Jamal, we're coming up on time here, but I just want to thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your knowledge, your experience with us. I think we all learned a lot from this. And I especially love your call out that, yes, the food has to be amazing and great, but that customer experience is also equally as important. And that's something that all of us at Guggenheimer are going to strive to do day in and day out. So appreciate you taking the time. Great chatting with you. And until next time, everyone, we'll see you soon. Thanks for joining in.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone.